Hello and welcome to this Noble Science of Defence training video. In this video we're going to take a look at the wards. Wards for us are different to parries, although in George Silver's time there is no word for parry in the English language yet, so he interchangeably uses ward and parry. I have separated them in our system so that we can use them for different applications. To parry is to redirect, to take away the energy of my opponent's attack, whereas to ward I'm simply going to guard or to ward off. I'm going to close my lines. So that's what we use our wards for, to close our line. In saying that, when I use my guardant ward, this is a ward to close the vast majority of the lines that I can. Generally in your variable fight, you will use your forehand ward. My forehand ward is to close my line with my hilt low, whereas my guardant ward will close my lines with my hilt high. So let's have a quick look at the wards to start with. I start in my guard. Without breaking my wrist, I press my hilt all the way over to my shoulder line. Here you'll see, when I'm here, this quarter is open and available. When I push my hilt to my shoulder line, this quarter is now closed. Again, on the outside, this quarter is available. I push my hilt to my shoulder line, this quarter is now closed. Technically, and we're not going to go into too much detail on these right now, but I have low, medium, and high, low, medium, and high on all of these wards. So the important usage of the ward is, although I can use it to defend a strike, it is best that I don't. To use a ward to defend a strike, I'm going to be catching edge on edge, and I'm going to be catching directly into the strength of the incoming attack. That's not something I want to do. I want to use my parries to redirect or disperse the energy of my opponent's incoming attack. My wards are simply to close my line. If I make a step, I naturally open one of my quarters. So if I step to my inside, from my opponent's perspective, my outside quarter will now be more open. If I step to the outside, then my inside quarter will be more open. So if I use my opponent here, if my opponent sees me move to his outside or my inside, he now has a very clear line into my outside quarter. And all he's going to do is make a strike to it. The same if I move to my outside to his inside, I'm just much more open. I step this way to discover this quarter on my opponent. It's very, very important to understand that by discovering his quarter, I reveal my own quarter. So though I step to discover the quarter of my opponent here, I reveal my quarter to my opponent. And thus we end up with a mutual exchange, unless I do something about it. This is the first use of my forehand ward. As I step to my inside, knowing that I'm going to reveal my outside quarter to my opponent, I step and leave my sword. I walk past my sword almost, leave my sword where it is and shift it into a ward. This way I close my outside quarter while still revealing my opponent's inside quarter. So if I step to my inside, I close my quarter as I go. If my opponent makes a strike now, you see he is already on my weapon, and yet his quarter is revealed. Same if I go to the inside, I go inside and close my quarter. If my opponent tries to strike, he is on my weapon and his quarter is revealed. So this is the first, most basic and most important use of your forehand ward. Every time I step, I open up a line and therefore I close it as I go. The same will work with my guardant ward. If I step to this side, I'm going to open this quarter. So as I step, I might walk underneath it. If I step to this side, I will open this quarter. And so I might move across to close that at the same time. The other use for my forehand ward is to trick my opponent. And in an engagement, I take my opponent's weapon and I push it offline. And what I'm doing at this position is I'm pushing my opponent's blade offline. I have closed my inside quarter to my opponent, and I have opened my outside quarter to my opponent. I've also told my opponent that I have control of their weapon and that I intend to do something with it. From this point of view, my opponent can see I have a straight line directly to him. So from this position, my opponent must act. So what he's going to do is try and retrieve his weapon, and he's going to have to come to the outside. And I simply step, make my ward, and close the line that I know I have opened and that my opponent will take. So I engage the inside, I press. My opponent tries to retrieve his weapon. I simply step and use my forehand ward to close that line. What you'll now see is I have quite a good line into my opponent. I can close, I can uncross and strike, or I can run away, depending on what my opponent is up to. If I do the same on the other side, so I engage my opponent, in which I expose my inside and remove my outside completely. As my opponent tries to retrieve his sword, I simply step forwards and make my inside forehand ward. You see here, I also, if I step forwards, defeat his position, so he has no true space. I have much true space, and thus I can simply make my strike. So as well as using this proactively, I can use it defensively against my opponent. So perhaps if we're in the first distance, which we might just about to be able to make on this video, if I see my opponent move to my inside, I simply make my inside ward. He has moved to discover my inside quarter. I simply close it. If my opponent does as I've already instructed, then as he moves to my inside quarter to discover my inside, he knows he reveals his inside quarter to me, so he also makes his inside ward. So then I make my inside ward. So if this is done correctly, we both end up with an inside ward versus an inside ward. And the position is essentially neutralized. If he does the same to the outside, he steps to the outside, and I simply make an outside ward and close down the line that he is trying to discover. If my opponent is foolish, he will engage the inside or move to the inside without covering his inside quarter that he has revealed to me. I close the quarter that he was looking to discover upon me, and I can simply strike him from there. Same on the outside. If he does not cover his quarter as he goes, I cover my quarter, and then I can simply strike. So the wards, the forehand ward in particular, is fairly simple. I know that I open a line, and I simply use it as a door to close. Every time I open the door, I use my weapon to close it. Thank you very much. I hope that was useful, and we look forward to see you training it in class.